Hi, welcome to our channel where we share the most intriguing stories. When a retired fire captain escapes to a secluded cabin in the Appalachians for peace, he expects silence, not war. But when a relentless HOA president sets her sights on his private land, a battle ignites. Trespassers, drones, lawsuits. This isn't just property, it's a war zone. I bought the cabin to get away from people. That was the whole point. After 2 decades in the fire service, 10 of those as captain, I'd had my fill of sirens, barking voices, and the steady hum of city madness. The cabin, nestled deep in a cedar valley in the Tennessee stretch of the Appalachians, was supposed to be my final act of defiance against the noise. It had 1 road in, 1 bridge over a creek, and now, thanks to me, 1 solid set of electronic gates with a full perimeter camera setup and a voice-enabled intercom. You couldn't just pop in. You either had permission or you didn't. I liked it that way. That morning, I'd been working on reinforcing the timber posts that lined the old footbridge behind the cabin. The rain earlier in the week had swollen the creek, and I wasn't about to let some stray log rip my walkway in half. I was mid-swing with the mallet when the intercom pinged. I wiped my hands on my jeans and jogged back to the gatepost, where the feed showed a white Subaru parked just outside the fence. Standing next to it was a woman, late 60s maybe, silver-gray hair pulled back into an aggressive ponytail, bright purple windbreaker, clipboard in hand. Behind her stood another woman and a man in hiking clothes, both looking annoyed like they'd just missed brunch. She pressed the call button again. "Hello?" she said, with the brittle tone of someone used to being obeyed. "This is HOA personnel. We're here for scheduled trail access. Please open the gate." I held down the voice button. "I'm sorry, who exactly are you with?" "This is Cheryl Garner, president of the Brook Pine Ridge Homeowners Association. These guests are here for a nature excursion we've organized. I was told this route connects directly to the ridge trail behind your cabin." "It doesn't," I said, "and this is private property." "I'm not part of your HOA, ma'am," she scoffed. Actually scoffed. "Sir, this route has been used by residents for years. I'm just asking you to open the gate. We won't be long." I could feel the pressure in my temples start to climb. "That gate's staying closed. This is my land, legally surveyed and documented. No public access. I'd appreciate it if you and your guests turn around." Cheryl muttered something to her group, then looked dead into the camera. "We'll be reporting this," she said flatly and marched back to her car. I stood there a moment, watching as they drove off, the camera catching one last glare from her over her shoulder. I figured that was the end of it. Entitled people didn't like hearing no, but they usually ran out of steam once it became clear I wasn't going to play along. I was wrong. About 30 minutes later, while I was tightening the anchor bolts on the creek railing, I heard a sharp snap from the woods to the east, followed by hushed voices, branches breaking, and then a low grunt. I walked slowly toward the source, staying out of sight. When I got close enough to see, my gut twisted. 6 people, all in bright activewear like they were on a REI catalog cover. 2 of them were lifting a section of my side fencing, wood slats I'd put up myself, and pushing through under it. Another was filming it on their phone. I didn't shout. I didn't make a scene. I walked back to the cabin, grabbed my phone, and opened the app tied to my perimeter cams. Clear as day, the group was on the edge of my land, pushing through the fence where the terrain dipped near the ravine. I recorded the feed, then called the sheriff's department. "Yes, this is Declan Braywood. I've got a group of people trespassing on my land off Cedar Loop. I've got them on camera damaging my fence and crossing onto the property without consent. They claim to be affiliated with Brook Pine Ridge HOA. I need a deputy sent out." The dispatcher promised someone would be there within the hour. Meanwhile, I uploaded the footage to cloud storage, printed off a new sign on weatherproof board, and carried it down to the lower trail junction. I bolted it directly to a cedar post at eye level, in bright red letters, "Private Forest. Trespassers will be prosecuted. Cameras active. No exceptions." When the deputy arrived, he took one look at the footage and whistled. "Yup, that's criminal trespass and property damage. No question. You want to press charges?" "Not yet," I said. But I want it logged. I've got a feeling this isn't the last time." As he finished writing the report, I saw something stuck in the frame of my gate camera, a folded piece of glossy paper. I walked up and pulled it free. A brochure. "Brook Pine Ridge Nature Experience," it said in fancy serif font. Inside, a map, one that highlighted a scenic bluff overlook, clearly marked. "Just past my cabin. right through my damn land. At the bottom, all sites accessible via HOA trails. Contact Cheryl G for access details. They were selling access to land that wasn't theirs, and now it was personal. I didn't expect to see her again the next day, but there she was. Same bright purple jacket, same clipboard. Only now she had 2 new companions with her. One man in a cheap navy blazer who looked like a retired mall cop, and a woman in hiking boots carrying what appeared to be a folder of documents and a laminated map. They stood just outside the gate, pretending the previous day hadn't happened. The Subaru was back too, parked at an angle like it owned the gravel. I was on my cabin's deck, drinking black coffee and oiling the wood steps when the gate speaker chirped. I set the can aside and walked over, already regretting the fact that I hadn't installed a flamethrower instead of an intercom. "Mr. Braywood," Cheryl said, enunciating every syllable like she was reading for a courtroom drama. "This is an official request on behalf of the Brook Pine Ridge HOA to access designated observation points within our understood perimeter of community use." "You mean the private property I legally own?" I replied. The man in the blazer stepped closer to the camera. "This land has been used for over 15 years by members of the community as a hiking route. Under state precedent, such use constitutes potential public easement." I rolled my eyes so hard it almost gave me a headache. "Do you even know what an easement is?" Cheryl interrupted before I could continue. "We're not here to argue. We're here to notify. Per the HOA's advisory board, access to the Cedar Bluff Overlook will resume starting next Saturday between 10 and 4 as part of our spring welcome hike. We are extending you the courtesy of advance notice." "I'll extend you the courtesy of telling you to leave my property now," I said. "And if you try stepping onto it again, you'll be met with cameras, sheriff's deputies, and civil liability paperwork stapled to your forehead." That last part must have touched a nerve. Cheryl's cheeks flushed like she was storing a month's worth of fury in each one. She stepped forward and slammed a document against the gate's camera box. "This is an official notice from the HOA. Read it. Understand what you're interfering with. You are obstructing a community resource." I watched in complete silence as they turned back toward the car. The woman in hiking boots took a few photos of my property on the way, whispering something I didn't catch, and the blazer man made a show of checking his watch, as if disappointed I didn't invite them in for lemonade and surrender. Once they were gone, I went out and collected the notice. It was printed on Brook Pine Ridge letterhead, some lawyerly nonsense about public benefit, tradition of access, natural features shared by the broader community. It had no legal signature, no county stamps, and no reference to my property's actual legal parcel number. In short, it was noise. Still, I scanned it, photographed it, and forwarded everything to Kate, my attorney. She replied within 20 minutes. "This is bluffing. Meaningless paper, but let's stay ahead of this. Want me to start a formal cease and desist?" I told her yes. Also asked if we could get a quick pull from the county recorder's office on any easement claims, historical or otherwise, just to be thorough. Then I opened the fireproof box I keep inside the cabin's closet and pulled out the big black binder, my land surveyor folder. Every angle of this place, every boundary, every foot of the old logging road, marked and notarized. It had taken me 3 months to get it all mapped when I bought the property, but I knew exactly where my rights ended, and Cheryl was miles outside of them. I made 5 copies of the key survey pages and laminated one. Then I walked down to the gate, unscrewed the faded "No Trespassing" sign, and replaced it with the laminated survey and a fresh metal plate beneath it that read, "Private road, no public easements. Legal access restricted. Violators will be recorded and prosecuted. Let them chew on that." Around dusk, I heard a soft crunch of tires on gravel outside the gate. I checked the feed. A black SUV had pulled up and idled for a full minute. I zoomed the camera. Different plate. Out of county. Driver didn't get out, just sat. Engine humming, lights off, staring at the gate. After 5 minutes, they backed up and disappeared into the trees. I didn't like it. That night, I reprogrammed the gate to require remote unlock for my phone instead of the keypad. Then I replaced the passcode entirely and ran a full perimeter check with a flashlight and sidearm. Found fresh boot prints near the ravine fence, the same one those hikers had forced up the day before. Someone had tried to jam a stick between the latch and the post. I reinforced it with galvanized brackets and a steel lock, then left the floodlight on all night. Before going to sleep, I added a final touch. I logged into my drone system and set the patrol radius to auto-activate at motion beyond the gate. Then I armed the facial recognition system. Anyone who showed up twice would be flagged. Anyone who lingered would be tracked. They wanted to play homeowner games. Fine. I'd show them how a fire captain plays back. A few days passed without incident, though I never let my guard down. The drone picked up a few false alarms, raccoons mostly, and once a fox that seemed more curious than criminal. I figured maybe the HOA circus had moved on. I even let myself believe it for a day or two. I fixed some siding, cleaned out the creek bed, and finally started building the firewood shelter I'd been putting off since spring. Then the envelope came. Plain, Manila, no return address. Left in my rural P.O. box, wedged between a hardware catalog and a seed company flyer. Inside was a set of neatly folded forms from the County Fire and Safety Committee, a department I knew well. I'd worked with them in my years as a fire captain. The first form cited an anonymous report claiming that access to emergency service routes on the Cedar Creek corridor may be compromised due to unauthorized gate installation and overgrown foliage. There was a printed notification of a scheduled preliminary inspection within the next 2 weeks. The second form was more bureaucratic poison, something about failure to accommodate regional fire easement guidelines may result in administrative review or fines under Section 9A. It read like someone had copy-pasted a legal code from a dusty PDF and hoped it sounded scary enough to rattle me. I knew immediately who was behind it. No one else had the motive or the gall. Cheryl must have pulled strings at the county level or found someone on the inside gullible enough to believe her story. Either way, this wasn't just nuisance now. This was an escalation. I called Kate, my attorney, and read the letter over speaker. She sighed so hard I could hear her tap her desk. "That's abuse of process," she said, "and not subtle. If she filed it under her HOA's name or authority, that opens her up to a whole new level of liability." I asked her what we could do. "We file a counter-complaint with the Office of Administrative Review. Get ahead of it. I'll draft it. Meanwhile, start documenting everything: vegetation management, fire access, even your drone footage. Prove the road is accessible and compliant." I didn't wait for morning. That night, I took the drone up and did a full pass of the access road. Every bend, every clearing, every point where a fire engine could turn around. I uploaded the video to cloud storage and labeled it clearly: Emergency Access Path. Unobstructed, verified. The next morning, I trimmed the brush on the driveway down to bare gravel, regraded the incline leading to the main turn-in, and took wide-angle shots from road level. Then I climbed up to the gate post and attached a laminated sign: Emergency Vehicle Turnout Compliant, Gate Access Available by Request, Surveillance Active. A day later, I got another envelope, this one official with a seal. It was from the County Planning and Zoning Commission. Inside, a notice of review regarding a claim that the access road to my property was originally designated as a shared-use lane prior to formal subdivision, and that a complaint had been filed requesting a temporary restriction on vehicular gating. At the bottom of the page, listed under Requesting Party, was the name I'd expected: Cheryl Garner, on behalf of Brook Pine Ridge HOA. She'd gone full bureaucratic. I wanted to put my fist through something. Instead, I got to work. I pulled every document I had on the property's platting and parcel history. I located the original subdivision filing from the 80s, which showed no shared-use lane and a clearly delineated boundary enclosing my access road entirely within private property. I made copies, printed maps, and forwarded them to Kate with a simple note: time to go nuclear. Kate filed an emergency appeal to block the review, citing procedural overreach and coordinated harassment. She also filed a public records request to unearth any correspondence between Cheryl Garner and county officials over the past 60 days. And then, because I had no intention of sitting around and waiting, I did what Cheryl never expected. I built a second gate. Not just any gate. I hired a contractor to install a heavy-duty steel barrier halfway down the driveway, just before the incline turns. Solar-powered locking arms independent code panel with a steel bollard barrier on both sides. The first gate was defensive. This one was psychological. I wanted them to see it and understand. You come for me, I double down. I also called in a favor from an old friend at the fire department, Jason, now a county chief. I asked him to swing by for an informal walkthrough. He showed up in uniform with 2 juniors and a service engine. We tested the access road from bottom to top. No problems. He even laughed and said my road was easier than most paved developments. He signed a memo on official letterhead that I could present to the Planning Commission. "You've got nothing to worry about," he said as he climbed into the engine. "But she's going to keep poking. Be ready." I was. What I wasn't ready for was what came next. That evening, the drone pinged again. 2 unidentified individuals walking just outside the secondary gate, scoping the property. One had a clipboard. The other took photos. At first, I thought they were surveyors. Then one of them turned toward the camera and smiled. It was the woman in hiking boots from Cheryl's last visit. The storm hit just after midnight, sharp and fast, like a fist from the sky. Thunder rolled over the valley in steady pulses, and the rain came down hard enough to blur the cabin windows. I lay awake in bed, not because I feared the storm, but because I didn't trust the people it might conceal. After everything Cheryl had pulled, the lies, the forms, the bureaucratic ambushes, I knew this wasn't over. She didn't back off. She doubled down. That made her dangerous. Around 2 in the morning, the drone feed pinged. Motion detected. South perimeter, just beyond the creek. I sat up, pulled on my boots, and tapped the tablet beside the bed. The infrared overlay kicked in. 5 figures moving through the trees. No flashlights, no talking, just slow, steady shapes creeping up the ridge in the rain. One slipped in the mud. Another grabbed their arm. I zoomed the lens. Backpacks. Water bottles, a camera. They were on a goddamn tour. I threw on my jacket, clipped the radio to my belt, and made my way to the south fence line, cutting through the trees to stay off the path. My boots sank into the soaked moss, and the wind smelled of wet bark and cold metal. The closer I got, the louder the voices became. Low murmurs, casual, like they weren't even trying to hide. I reached the clearing behind the overlook boulder just as the group came stumbling through the tree line, right into my no trespassing zone. 7 of them, not 5. 2 more had joined from the eastern side. One man held up a phone, filming as if he were hosting a travel vlog. Another was chewing something loudly and leaving a trail of candy wrappers along the path. One woman, maybe in her 50s, stood at the edge of the bluff, posed with arms outstretched like she was Leonardo DiCaprio on a Titanic-themed Instagram shoot. That was when I saw the worst of it. One of the younger guys unzipped his pants and started peeing directly onto the base of the warning sign I'd posted last week. I stepped out of the shadows and flicked on my flashlight, blinding half the group in a burst of white. "Party's over," I said. "Hands where I can see them." Screams, gasps, scrambling. The cameraman dropped his phone. The candy guy fell backward into a bush. Leonardo nearly tripped off the bluff. "What the hell?" someone shouted. "Who are you?" "I own this property," I said, walking forward. "You're trespassing. I've got you all on thermal, on camera, and the sheriff's already on the way." That part was a lie. Hadn't called them yet, but it got the point across. The pissing guy zipped up fast. A woman with a bright pink headlamp tried to protest. "We were told this was part of a sanctioned HOA tour." I barked out a laugh. "Sanctioned by who? Satan?" I motioned with the flashlight toward the way they came. "Start walking. You're leaving now." Before they could respond, I heard tires crunching on gravel and saw headlights swinging around the curve of the main access road. A vehicle was pulling up to the second gate. I activated the drone camera. It was Cheryl. Of course it was Cheryl. She stepped out in a blue raincoat, holding an umbrella and a goddamn DSLR camera. "Declan Braywood!" she shouted across the valley, like she was summoning a beast from a medieval novel. "You have no legal right to detain these guests. This land is part of a recognized shared recreational zone." I waved my flashlight in her direction. "Shut up, Cheryl. You're interfering with community access. This bluff has been visited by our residents for generations." I walked to the group of soggy intruders. "You heard her. She's claiming you're on her land. Let's test that in court." They hesitated. One guy tried to run back toward the creek, but slipped and slammed into the mud with a yelp. Then came the second car, black SUV, Sheriff's Department. 2 deputies stepped out, one older, calm, hand on his belt. The other younger, scanning the tree line with a flashlight. They approached the group, eyes taking in the backpacks, the candy wrappers, the damage to the fence post they'd bent back on the way in. "You the property owner?" the senior deputy asked. "Declan Braywood." "Yes, all on video. They came in through the back slope, damaged fencing, ignored posted warnings, and entered private land knowingly." Cheryl stomped forward, rain beating on her glasses. "This is outrageous." These are law-abiding citizens on a nature walk. The deputy turned to her. Ma'am, did you organize this group? I facilitated community exploration. That's perfectly within my rights. Did you have written permission to enter this land? It's not necessary. It's part of the deputy cut her off. Let me be clear. No easement exists here. I'm familiar with the boundaries. Mr. Braywood's property is entirely private. I suggest you stop talking before you make it worse. He turned back to the group. 3 of you stay put. The rest, head back to your vehicle. You'll be contacted. For now, we're detaining individuals involved in property damage and trespassing. I pointed at the one who'd urinated on my sign. That one stays. Pink headlamp woman tried to protest again. We didn't mean to cause any harm. You stepped over a fence and into a felony, I said flatly. You caused harm. The deputies moved fast. Zip ties, statements, IDs. Cheryl stood frozen in place, lip twitching as her world tilted. The camera hung limp in her hand. I will report this to the county board, she said in a dead voice. Already have, I muttered. Before leaving, I gave the deputy a USB with the drone footage from earlier that night, time-stamped and annotated. He thanked me, said it would make things easier for the DA. By the time they left, the bluff was empty. The rain had stopped, and the ground was littered with soggy prints and shredded brochures. I picked one up. Brook Pine Ridge welcomes you to the hidden overlook. I crumpled it and tossed it into the fire pit. 3 days passed with a silence that felt less like peace and more like a loaded gun on a nightstand. The sheriff's office had confirmed the charges against Cheryl's guests: trespassing, property damage, public indecency in one case. But that wasn't the win it might have seemed, because Cheryl didn't act like someone who had been humbled. She acted like someone regrouping. The proof came Tuesday morning. I was nursing coffee on the front deck when I heard the growl of an engine that didn't belong. I checked the drone feed. A white county vehicle slowly climbing the main access road. I walked out to meet them at the gate. A man stepped out. Khakis, windbreaker, clipboard. The sort of expressionless face you get when someone's just following orders and doesn't like conflict. Mr. Braywood, he asked. Yeah. You from planning? Zoning compliance. Name's Ellery. We received a directive to perform a site review per multiple complaints regarding unauthorized barriers and infrastructure upgrades on potential mixed-use land. Let me guess. Cheryl Garner filed it. He didn't answer, which told me enough. I led him down the gravel path while the drone hovered quietly overhead. He asked neutral questions about when I installed the second gate, if I'd filed any recent construction permits, whether the fire access signs were verified by county authority. I answered calmly. Clearly, I showed him documents. He took notes. And photos. A lot of photos. After about 20 minutes, he stopped near the bluff trail and looked up from his clipboard. There's a petition going through the local board, he said, filed by the Brook Pine Ridge HOA. They're requesting a review of your property's historical access status. If it's determined that any portion of your land was previously open to the public and that closure has diminished community value, well, it might complicate things. I squinted at him. There's no legal precedent for that here. There wasn't, he said, but this is Tennessee. County councils get creative when enough retirees complain. He handed me a printed notice. Public hearing notification, parcel use dispute review, scheduled for 10 days from now. Good luck, he muttered. That night, I stayed up, pacing. Cheryl had changed tactics again. No more fake inspections. No more passive-aggressive excursions. Now she was targeting the property's very identity. If she could convince the board that my land was historically public, even for a sliver of trail, they might try to force a compromise. That meant forced easements, conditional zoning changes, maybe even forced gate removal. Kate confirmed it over the phone. They're throwing legal spaghetti at the wall to see what sticks. It's not about winning anymore. It's about draining you. I'm not getting drained, I growled, then hit back. Not just with defense. Offense. She helped me draft a cease and desist letter, official, notarized, full of teeth. It demanded the immediate halt of any HOA activity involving references to my land, revoked any implied access through my boundaries, and warned that future violations would trigger litigation under Tennessee Code, Section 39-14405, for criminal trespass and misrepresentation. I delivered it the next morning in person. Pulled up to the Brook Pine Ridge HOA office, a beige modular building that reeked of HOA brochures and stale muffins. Walked in, all boots and storm cloud energy. Cheryl was behind the desk, typing something smug into a laptop. She looked up. "You can't be here." "Neither can your people on my land," I said, and dropped the envelope on her keyboard. "This is official notice. You ignore it. Next time I send a marshal." "You'll regret this," she said quietly. "Number you will." I walked out before she could spew more delusions. On the way back, I noticed something new. Several street signs in the HOA community now had small trail markers nailed under them, blue arrows pointing into the woods. Into my woods. Subtle, misleading. Designed to manipulate residents into assuming access. I took photos of every single one. Later that day, I drove into town and filed a formal complaint with the county recorder's office and added a civil claim against the HOA for willful public deception and misrepresentation of property boundaries. I attached images of the trail markers, the brochure from the last tour, and the drone footage from the recent trespass incident. It felt good, but it wasn't enough. So I went one step further. I installed motion-activated speakers along the ridgeline, hidden, loud, set to trigger a booming voice recording that said, in my own voice, "You are trespassing on private property. Leave immediately. You are being recorded." Cheryl wanted drama. I'd give her theater. The hearing day came wrapped in cold fog and sour tension. I wore a pressed button-down and brought a binder thick with documentation, deeds, survey maps, notarized statements, and color printouts of trail marker photos. Kate walked in beside me like a storm dressed in charcoal gray. Her eyes scanned the county board meeting room like she was casing a vault. The place was half full. Neighbors, HOA members, county staff, and Cheryl, of course, sitting in the front row like a queen in exile. She was surrounded by a small entourage of HOA loyalists, all in matching green windbreakers like they were part of some failing cult. I caught her eye, and she smiled like someone who thinks she's already won. The chairman called the meeting to order. The agenda item, review of historical access concerns, Braywood Ridge Trail dispute. The first 30 minutes were standard protocol. Cheryl was allowed to present first, and she did so with theatrical confidence. She rolled out a large laminated map that conveniently ignored my parcel boundaries and instead highlighted traditionally used nature routes in friendly green curves that, what a surprise, cut straight through my property. "This path has been informally used by local residents for over 20 years, she said, voice dripping with practiced concern. "We believe the recent installation of industrial-grade security features has disrupted long-standing community enjoyment of the Appalachian landscape." One of the board members raised an eyebrow. "Do you have any documented proof of public right-of-way?" Cheryl's smile didn't flinch. "While not officially recorded, the use of the trail is common knowledge among our residents. We believe the precedent of access has been established through long-term use, what's sometimes referred to as a prescriptive easement." Kate stood up so fast her chair groaned. "No such easement exists," she said, flipping open a folder. "And the very idea of prescriptive access requires open, uninterrupted, continuous public use for 20 years without objection. My client bought the land 3 years ago. The gate was installed 2 years ago. And the HOA has no standing to claim access across a property it never had legal title to." She handed out copies of the 2019 topographical survey, the recorded title, and, my personal favorite, a printed transcript of Cheryl's voicemail from last year, asking, "Could we maybe use your bridge for a few quiet walks? No big deal." So much for long-standing historical access. Kate dropped the final hammer with the sheriff's incident reports, the drone footage, and the official cease and desist letter. The room shifted. Even the more HOA-friendly members looked uncomfortable. Still, one board member, an older guy named Hank, who clearly knew Cheryl, cleared his throat. "But don't you think, Mr. Braywood, that keeping nature trails locked away behind gates sends a poor message to the community?" I leaned forward. "What sends a poor message is telling people they're entitled to something just because they want it. This isn't a national park. It's not up for vote. You don't get to hand out pieces of someone else's land like candy at a homeowner's picnic." Silence. The chairman glanced around, then nodded. "Thank you. We'll take a recess and reconvene with a recommendation." Cheryl looked like someone had switched off her batteries. After the meeting, Kate and I stepped outside into the crisp air. I thought we'd earned a pause. I thought the next days would be quiet. They weren't. 2 nights later, I was reviewing camera footage when I noticed a dark figure standing by the front gate, just outside the camera's optimal lighting range, not moving, just standing, watching. By the time I got there, they were gone, but they'd left something behind. A laminated trail marker nailed to a cedar tree barely visible from the road, a fresh blue arrow pointing into my forest. I pulled it out with a crowbar, dropped it at my feet, and stood there a long time in the dark. It wasn't over. I didn't sleep that night. I sat by the window watching the woods until dawn painted the hills in washed-out blue. The idea that someone had stood just outside my gate, close enough to be threatening, far enough to be deniable, itched under my skin like fiberglass. That blue arrow hadn't just been a signpost. It was a message. You don't control this. I needed to know how deep this went. By noon, I had a plan. First, I walked the perimeter myself. 3 miles of rugged hills and pine-twisted creeks. I wore the chest rig with the GoPro and had a thermal drone tracking overhead. The forest was unusually still. No birds, no wind, just the occasional crack of a branch under my own boots. And then I found it. Near the east slope, tucked into a rock outcropping behind a dying oak, was a wooden box mounted to a tree. It was disguised as a birdhouse, but up close it had a clear HOA logo stamped on the side, Brook Pine Ridge Trail Committee. Inside, tour maps, folded brochures, a stapled list of recommended overlook stops, and my cabin bluff was marked with a bold red star. I ripped it down and brought it back to the house. Kate was already there, pacing on the porch with her phone. "County clerk just called," she said. "Someone submitted a motion to amend your property zoning. They're trying to get it designated as a shared conservation corridor." I stared at her. "They're using the same land you just proved was private," I said. "They're playing dirty now." It's a stall tactic. If they get it to hearing, it buys them weeks to keep pushing propaganda. Meanwhile, they've got people thinking this land is open to the public. I showed her the birdhouse box. Her jaw tightened. "This isn't just harassment anymore," she said. "It's organized disinformation." That night, I went on the offensive. I created a digital press kit. Inside, annotated drone footage, time-stamped trespassing clips, photos of the fake trail boxes, copies of HOA promotional materials showing my property without permission. I sent it to the local paper, 3 regional blogs, and a firefighters advocacy newsletter I used to contribute to. The subject line was simple: "Retired fire captain under siege by rogue HOA. Private property or public playground?" It didn't take long to catch fire. The next morning, my inbox exploded. One blog posted a side-by-side breakdown of my property deed and the trail map Cheryl had distributed. Another posted an op-ed titled "When HOAs Become Militias." And then came the email that really changed the game. It was from a former Brook Pine Ridge board member, now living out of state. He'd seen the coverage. He told me he'd resigned 2 years ago after Cheryl tried to push a plan to gradually reclaim unregulated perimeter lands by falsifying community history and encouraging passive infiltration. He attached a PDF of internal emails, Cheryl bragging about redefining jurisdiction through community presence, referencing my land specifically. She even described my bluff as a sleeping asset, just waiting for community integration. I sent it straight to Kate. She called me within minutes. "We're done playing defense," she said. We're going to court." That same day, we filed a civil lawsuit against Cheryl Garner and the Brook Pine Ridge HOA, citing malicious misrepresentation of land use, coordinated trespassing and defamation, unauthorized public promotion of private lands, and an attempted zoning manipulation based on fraudulent historic claims. We also requested an emergency injunction barring the HOA from placing any materials, markers, or signage within 100 feet of my property line. But the story wasn't over. That night, while reviewing the security feed, I caught motion again. This time, 2 figures walking directly up to the second gate, just outside the sensor perimeter. They paused, looked up at the camera, then spray-painted the lens black. The feed cut to static. They were careful, professional. No faces, no license plate. I ran out in the dark with a flashlight and my sidearm heart pounding, but they were already gone. Just boot prints in the gravel and one more thing, taped to the gate with surgical precision, a laminated flyer. Brook Pine Ridge Scenic Access Route, coming soon. I pulled it down and my hands shook, not from fear, from fury. I didn't sleep that night either. I sat at the kitchen table with a sidearm on the placemat and the laminated flyer pinned to the corkboard by a steak knife. I wasn't scared, not in the traditional sense, but I was past the point of irritation, past legal maneuvering, and passive resistance. This was siege warfare now, and I wasn't about to let a petty tyrant with a brochure fetish take 1 inch of what I'd earned. By sunrise, Kate had filed the motion for the emergency injunction. The hearing was scheduled for 72 hours later, but she called me again that morning with a voice like flint. "Change of plans," she said. "You're going to want to check your county file." I logged into the portal, and there it was, a countercomplaint. Cheryl and her board had filed a claim alleging I had obstructed community safety access by blocking what they referred to as an emergency public trail historically used by hikers and first responders. She even cited a fake incident, a fabricated claim that an injured hiker had been delayed because of my gates. And as her final act of hubris, she included a scanned affidavit signed by one of her friends, asserting that my land had always been part of the Brook Pine Ridge Conservation Corridor. It was a full-on offensive, a lie wrapped in legal formatting. I showed it to Kate in person. She stared at it like it smelled like gasoline. They're not just stalling anymore, they're framing you. If we don't go nuclear now, they'll flood the board with enough bad faith paperwork to force a forced mediation. Then we nuke it, I said, and that's exactly what we did. The next morning, we walked into the courthouse with our own grenade, the full timeline of Cheryl's campaign, the emails from the ex-board member, the flyers, the surveillance footage, the drone videos, the copy of her HOA brochure marketing my bluff as a community access scenic overlook. We attached over 50 pages of evidence, mapped out into a 4-part civil lawsuit: trespassing and organized encroachment, forgery and document, falsification, zoning interference under false pretenses, defamation, and targeted harassment. Kate requested a temporary restraining order on Cheryl and any acting agents of the HOA, barring them from within 200 feet of my boundary lines. The judge took one look at the evidence pile and set an expedited hearing for 48 hours later. And that hearing, it was carnage. Kate dissected Cheryl on the stand like a seasoned surgeon with a grudge. She made her read the fake conservation flyer out loud, made her explain the birdhouse trail box, played video of her HOA guests throwing trash on my bluff. The courtroom was dead silent. And when Cheryl tried to pivot, claiming that there was always an understanding about shared use, Kate dropped the final bomb. A dated digital image of Cheryl herself standing outside my gate from 3 years ago, waving at the camera and saying, "Just wanted to see what it looked like past the fence. Never been here before." The judge didn't even blink. In his final statement, he ruled, my property was entirely private, free of any historical encumbrance. The HOA and Cheryl Garner had deliberately misrepresented facts to county officials. Their actions amounted to a coordinated campaign of property harassment and attempted regulatory manipulation. Cheryl was found personally liable for falsifying zoning-related documents, trespass-related incitement, and deliberate community endangerment through false emergency claims. The verdict: the HOA was ordered to pay $1,250,000 in damages and civil penalties. Cheryl Garner was sentenced to 22 months in county detention with mandatory psychological evaluation and a 5-year ban from holding any HOA-related office. All trail markers, printed materials, and digital references to my property were ordered to be destroyed or removed within 10 days. A public notice was to be issued in the local paper correcting the community trail narrative and confirming my sole ownership. When the gavel dropped, Cheryl just sat there. Her eyes had that 1,000-yard stare, like she'd just realized the tour bus she'd been driving had plunged off a cliff. I didn't smile, not yet. That came a week later. I used part of the settlement to rebuild the gate, but this time I didn't just install iron and concrete. I commissioned a retired fire station in Knoxville to deliver one of their decommissioned trucks. We mounted it just behind the fence. A red behemoth, engine gutted, light still flashing on solar. Right in front of it, I welded a custom sign: private cabin. Not a tour stop, not a trailhead, not your damn business. Neighbors started showing up, cheering, laughing. I gave out stickers. My gate, my land, not your community hiking experience. And finally, for the first time in months, I stood at the top of my bluff, breathing in the silence. Real silence. No intrusions. No spray paint. Just wind and pines and the sound of a battle won without backing down an inch.